Hello, dear listener. Wherever you are tonight, whether curled beneath soft blankets, settling your thoughts after a long day, or gently unwinding before sleep, welcome. This is your time to relax and drift. Tonight, we will journey into a quiet, ancient world. Not one of loud battles or rushing history, but one of stillness and sand, and stories softly buried beneath centuries. We will walk beside the Nabataeans, desert dwellers, water whisperers, and silent stone carvers of time. Let your mind settle. Feel your breath slow. And with each word, allow the world around you to grow quieter, and the ancient world to come alive in peaceful detail. Tonight, we begin in the soft heart of the desert. Long ago, it begins not with a city, but with a caravan. A slow, peaceful train of camels, their padded feet pressing into warm sand. The sun is not yet high. A pale gold light glows across the dunes, and there, wrapped in linen and soft wool, walk the ancestors of a people who would one day become kings of the desert. They were not kings yet, not even close. These were the early Nabataeans, nomads, traders, water-gatherers. Their homes were not carved into cliffs but stitched from animal hides. They slept beneath the stars, ate dates and flatbread near coals that flickered quietly in the night wind. They knew the desert, not just its dangers but its silences. They knew the taste of hidden springs, the scent of coming rain, the way to trace an old caravan path just by the softened shape of stones left behind. The Nabataeans were not warriors but watchers. They watched other empires rise and fall, Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians. They traded with them, walked among them, but kept to the dry margins of their maps. And they waited for their moment. But not in a rush. No, their story rises slowly, like the warm breath of wind that rolls across an open wadi. To understand the Nabataeans is to understand their greatest treasure. Not gold, not palaces, but roots. Imagine now that you are walking among their caravan. The air is hot but dry, not stifling. Your camel plods along with a gentle sway. Around you, soft linen flutters in the breeze. There is no rush. You carry frankincense from Arabia, spices from India, dyes and silks perhaps from further still, all bound for great cities to the north and west, Damascus, Gaza, even Alexandria. But the journey is long, and between here and there, only the Nabataeans know where to find water. They are masters of the cistern. They build them into the earth, line them with stone, cover them with desert-colored lids. From above, invisible, but to the Nabataeans, known, mapped in memory. They pass slowly, gently from spring to spring, oasis to oasis, like quiet desert ghosts. And in time, other peoples depend on them. At some point, we do not know the exact year, the Nabataeans stopped walking. They chose a place. A quiet canyon, flanked by sandstone cliffs, where water trickled from hidden cracks. They called it Rakhmu. We know it as Petra. It did not grow like other cities, no royal decree, no war-driven expansion. It simply formed. Homes dug into soft red rock, temples slowly chiseled by hand, paths worn smooth by centuries of sandals and hooves. Here, the Nabataeans did not build upwards. They built inward, into the stone. Facades taller than trees, carved not by armies but artisans. Columns that rise from nothing but cliff. And above all, silence. No smoke, no battle, no burning palaces. Just dust, stone, and the faint hum of trade. Now, let us wander gently through the streets of Petra. Not the bustling, dramatic version seen in films, but the quiet Petra of everyday life. A woman kneels at a shallow basin, washing grapes beneath water collected from yesterday's spring. A young boy walks past carrying a clay jar filled with oil, careful not to spill a drop. An old man leans against the cool stone of a temple wall, sipping something warm and spiced. There are no crowds, only a slow rhythm, the rhythm of a people who understand patience. They eat flatbread, dates, lentils seasoned with local herbs. They paint their walls with soft ochre tones. They wear flowing robes, not as fashion, but as harmony with the heat. Their language is Aramaic, tinged with Arabic roots. Their gods are many, but quietly respected. Al-Uzza, Dushara, not feared but honored with simple offerings and incense. There are no clocks here, only the slow arc of the sun across stone at night. Petra does not sleep. It sighs. Soft fires glow behind carved doorways. A lullaby echoes faintly from somewhere deeper in the canyon. Camels rest. The scent of cardamom drifts through the air. Families gather. They do not talk loudly. They share stories, slow ones, about ancestors, stars, and quiet miracles. Some point upward, naming constellations they've known for generations. Others simply lie on woven mats, letting the warmth of the stone beneath them cradle their backs. There are no thieves, no alarms, only the occasional bark of a dog, or the flutter of a desert owl. Time moves gently here. And as sleep settles in, the Nabataeans dream of journeys not yet taken and kings not yet crowned. Let us begin again, slowly. The sun is rising once more over Petra. Its golden light brushes the tops of cliffs, painting the walls of temples in gentle peach and rose. And beneath all of this, beneath the sand, beneath the stone, the real secret flows. Water. In a place where rain is rare, where rivers are only rumors, and where the earth itself is dry and cracked. Somehow Petra thrived. Not by chance, not by magic, but by quiet, thoughtful design. The Nabataeans were engineers, not of towers or catapults but of water. They studied the land, watched the clouds, mapped every trickle and stream that the desert offered. And with slow patience, they carved. The Nabataeans did not waste. When rain came, and it did come, though rarely, they were ready. The city's cliffs and roofs sloped just enough to guide water toward hidden spouts. From there, the water flowed into channels, then into cisterns, then into cool stone-lined reservoirs. Some were covered with stone lids. Others sat deep beneath the earth, where sunlight could not steal their moisture. These reservoirs, large and round, were often carved by hand. A single drop was precious, and so was time. It could take years to dig one, but the Nabataeans had years. They had calm, and they had knowledge passed softly from parent to child, a lineage not of warriors but of water-keepers. They built systems that could survive months without rain, and when the rains returned, the city welcomed it not with shouts but with stillness, just the quiet sound of droplets trickling into stone. Because of their water, and only because of it, Petra had gardens. Imagine that. Green in the desert. Not sprawling, showy gardens like those of royal palaces, but small practical ones, shaded by fig trees, fringed by herbs, mint, thyme, marjoram, dotted with vines and dusty olives. These were family gardens, tended daily, slowly. A woman kneels to check the roots of her grapevine. A child helps crush dried herbs for the kitchen. An elder watches the shadows grow longer across his plants, counting the days between waterings. There are bees, but they buzz softly. The soil is sandy, but nurtured with compost, dung, and care. Even in scarcity, there is abundance. But only when shared. If you walk through Petra today and let your steps be quiet, you will notice something. The sound. Or rather, the lack of it. The buildings do not creak. There are no splashes from fountains. No clang of metal or ring of bells. Just wind. And perhaps the memory of carving tools brushing rock. That's because the Nabataeans built with respect, not against nature but into it. They chose soft sandstone for its give. They followed the grain of the cliff, rather than fight it. They shaped doorways not with grand arches but gentle symmetry. Even their tombs, though vast and regal, seem to hum not shout. Inside, the ceilings are domed or flat, the walls smooth, the light filtered. Some tombs were decorated, others left bare, as if the person inside preferred the silence of stone over the chatter of marble. In every carving there is balance, and balance brings peace. Though the Nabataeans were deeply spiritual, they were also practical. They understood angles, slopes, and storage. They experimented with materials. They painted their walls with plant-based dyes, some still visible after 2,000 years. They used terracotta pipes for overflow. Wooden doors to preserve warmth. Their homes were modest, no palaces here. Just carved rooms, sometimes painted, sometimes plain. Openings near the ceilings allowed heat to escape. Storage niches held jars, tools, sacred scrolls. Even kitchens were built with thought. Low fire pits, sunken slightly into the floor. Clay ovens nestled safely against stone. Food was simple. Grains, fruits, goat cheese, herbs. Sometimes flatbread cooked over coals. Sometimes a stew left bubbling all morning in the shade. Mealtimes were slow, not because of custom, but because of calm. The day moved gently, and the Nabataeans moved with it. The Nabataeans had no great library, no university halls, and yet their knowledge lives on. In stone. Their script, Nabataean Aramaic, is soft, curving, rhythmic, found carved into walls, pottery, hidden doorways. Not all of it was meant to be read. Some was meant to be felt. Names, blessings, trade records, love notes, even graffiti, not crude but thoughtful. One simply reads, "I was here and the sun was good." Another, "May Dushara grant this trader safe travel." They wrote not for fame but for memory, not to impress but to preserve. And what they wrote remains. Even now, after wind and time have tried their best to erase them, the sun rises gently over Petra. Shadows slide off the carved tombs and sweep down into the canyon floor, where voices soft and mingled begin to stir. Petra has changed. It is no longer just a village of carvers and water seekers. It is something more. A crossroads. A whispering marketplace where the languages of the world drift through the dry morning air. Greek, Aramaic, Latin, Old Arabic, Egyptian, even the distant tones of Sanskrit and Tamil. Traders have come, not with armies but with olive oil and saffron, with glass and silk, with bolts of fine linen packed in camel saddlebags wrapped in woven netting. And yet, even with all this, Petra remains calm. The market is busy, but never loud. A copper merchant arranges bowls in neat rows, humming quietly. A boy counts sesame seeds for a visiting chef. A camel kneels, eyes half closed, as its rider negotiates gently with a Nabataean host. No one shouts. No one rushes. It is a city that breathes, not booms high above the market. In the quieter reaches of the cliffs, Petra holds its sacred places. Not temples of gold or towering columns, but of harmony. The most famous among them is Ad-Dir, the monastery, and though its name suggests solitude, it was likely a place of gathering, of rest, of ritual. Carved with exquisite care into the rose stone of the mountain, it rises with soft majesty. Its columns are wide, not sharp. Its design is balanced, not brash. Inside, shadows pool gently in corners. A soft, sacred darkness. It is cool, silent, and the echoes here do not startle, they hum like breath. The Nabataeans worshipped many gods. Their beliefs shifted gently with the winds of trade. From Arabia, they honored Al-Uzza, goddess of fertility. From their own desert roots they revered Dushara, a god often represented not in statue, but in smooth, uncarved stone blocks. These blocks stood on altars, untouched, not for lack of skill, but because the divine, for them, lived in presence, not image. Nabataean worship was not theatrical. There were no grand processions, no fanfare, only quiet offerings. A bowl of dates placed on a sun-warmed stone, a splash of perfume at the foot of a sacred niche, incense spiraling upward, caught by the soft desert wind. Priests and priestesses lived simply. They dressed plainly, spoke slowly, and worked beside everyone else. Rituals were held at dawn or dusk, when the world was already calm. Chants were murmured in harmony with the wind. Worshippers bathed, but not in rivers, in thought. Their sacred calendar followed the stars. They knew the solstice not by calculation, but by the angle of sunlight falling through a temple crack once a year. Faith was not separate from life. It was woven in. A Nabataean did not go to worship. They worshipped with every grain stored carefully, every well maintained, every neighbor greeted with kindness. It was not spectacle. It was stillness. Though Petra remained peaceful, the goods it welcomed were full of distant stories. From India came ivory and black pepper, rolled tightly into oiled cloth and sealed for months of desert travel. From Egypt came papyrus, thin sheets gently pressed into scrolls and records. From the Mediterranean came glass, green, blue, pale amber, in the form of vials, beads, and jars. And from Arabia came frankincense, so soft and fragrant that even a tiny pinch could scent a whole room. Nabataean merchants knew the worth of each. But trade here was not only goods, it was knowledge. With each caravan came tales of distant empires, strange weather, new ideas. And the Nabataeans listened, not to conquer, but to understand. They built guest houses simple and clean. They served warm goat's milk with honey. They did not judge what travelers believed, but simply asked them to speak gently and leave with thanks. And most did. The Nabataeans minted their own currency, not as an act of pride, but practicality. Their coins were small, often bronze, sometimes silver. They bore the faces of kings, and sometimes of gods. But rarely did these faces scowl or shout. Most wore serene expressions. Trade was simple. Prices were fair. Weights were standardized. A merchant laid out his wares at dawn, and by dusk, with soft conversation and slow exchanges, he packed away empty sacks and full purses. There were no auction bells, no haggling crowds, only the quiet clink of commerce, as natural as wind through reeds. Even Petra's marketplaces, though full, were carefully arranged. Stalls curved around open plazas. Pathways widened where foot traffic might meet. Shade was prioritized. and fountains, fed by those hidden cisterns, gently bubbled at the edges. Buying was never urgent. Selling was never desperate. It was simply daily life. As Petra grew, its homes remained modest. Most Nabataeans still lived as their grandparents had, carved dwellings in the rock. A front chamber for visitors. A side room for sleep. A cool storage nook for clay jars of grain, olives, dried fruits, and wine. The floor might be swept sand, or stone, smoothed by foot traffic. Mats were woven by hand. Oil lamps flickered in carved wall sconces. Children helped their parents with daily tasks. Grinding grain, carrying firewood, fetching water from the family's cistern. There were no schools, but plenty of teaching. A father showing his son how to trace trade routes by stars. A mother singing old songs while weaving. An elder reciting proverbs as he crushed herbs into medicine. It was a life of rhythm, not routine. Of purpose, not pressure. A life where the sun told time and silence was not feared. It was sacred. By the time Petra had grown into its golden age, the Nabataeans had something more than trade. They had a kingdom. But theirs was not a kingdom of conquest or noise. There were no triumphal arches, no rows of spears, no declarations carved in stone. It was a kingdom of trade, of roads, of quiet prosperity. Its kings were known but rarely worshipped. They did not build towering thrones, nor did they wear crowns every day. Instead, they governed with presence, with balance. Nabataean kings held councils, made not of nobles but of elders, scribes, and respected traders. Meetings were held beneath shaded colonnades or cool rock chambers, where dates and honeyed wine were served slowly. Debates were long, not because of indecision, but because there was no need to rush. Petra's law was based on fairness, not fear. Laws were written but gently. On clay tablets, on papyrus scrolls, in inscriptions etched quietly into city walls. The scribes of Petra were not cloaked in mystery or power. They were humble men and women, trained in language, numbers, and memory. In their hands, disputes were settled with calm words, not swords. A disagreement over land might result in shared use. A debt might be forgiven after a season of drought. Justice was not swift but sure, and always it moved at the pace of peace. Court records from this time show no mass executions, no prisons overfilled, only a few fines, and many agreements, sealed with a handshake and a whispered prayer. The law was part of life, not an interruption of it. The Nabataean Kingdom stretched far, not in terms of territory but in influence. Their trade routes wove like threads across the desert, and with those threads came trust. Instead of armies, the Nabataeans sent envoys, soft-spoken merchants who knew how to listen more than talk. They would arrive at Roman outposts, Greek city-states, even distant Persian courts, bearing gifts, maps, and friendship. They offered safe passage in return for peace, water for taxes, incense for respect. And most agreed. Because while others brought conquest, the Nabataeans brought calm. And in a world so often torn, calm was more valuable than gold. The Nabataeans understood the power of a message. Long before postal systems, they built networks of trusted messengers. These were not uniformed couriers, but ordinary travelers, each carrying a scroll, sealed in beeswax and linen. The journey might take weeks, but the message would arrive, unharmed, unrushed. In times of peace, which was most of the time, these scrolls carried news. Weather in the north, new tariffs in Gaza, a death, a birth, a prayer. In times of trouble, very rare, they carried warnings. But even then, the tone was measured. No panic, only purpose. And between Petra and the wider world, the words always flowed. The king's home was not a palace. It was large, yes, but carved like all others, into the stone of Petra. Its rooms were cool, not grand. Its pillars modest. Its floor covered in rugs, not gold. Here, the king would sit with visiting diplomats, break bread with local farmers, listen to musicians play soft melodies on reed flutes and stringed lyres. Children could walk its halls. Pets curled beneath benches. And on warm evenings, oil lamps flickered as elders told tales from the time before Petra was born. There was no throne room, only a wide meeting space. No guards in polished armor, only cousins and friends keeping watch. And the king. He ruled not by decree, but by presence. A soft word, a knowing glance, a nod that could quiet a room. At the end of each day, the court quieted. Scrolls were tied shut. Ink pots were sealed. Robes hung on carved pegs. Lanterns glowed with a steady amber light. The king's advisors walked home through the soft streets, stopping to greet shopkeepers or pat a sleepy dog. Nothing in Petra was hurried, not even power. In a world where other rulers built walls, the Nabataeans built roads. Where others armed themselves, they offered water. Where others sought conquest, they sought cooperation. And in this way, their kingdom grew, not loudly, but steadily. And all through the warm stone canyons of Petra, the only sound at night was wind, and the memory of decisions made without anger. As the Nabataean Kingdom thrived in its quiet way, far beyond the dunes and wadis of their homeland, another power stirred, slow yet steady. Rome. At first the Romans were simply names on scrolls, a rumor in the marketplace, a distant empire across the sea. Their soldiers hadn't come yet, only their coins. Silver denarii began appearing in the hands of Nabataean traders, stamped with stern faces wearing laurel crowns, heavy, cool, unfamiliar. The merchants noticed them, the scribes recorded them, and the kings, they paid attention. But they did not panic. Instead, they adjusted. New trade routes were mapped, new scripts studied, new tongues learned in the quiet courtyards of Petra. No walls were built, no swords drawn. The Nabataeans would not resist with steel. They would respond with stillness. As the Roman Empire expanded eastward, the sands around Petra grew busier. Roman traders began to pass through. Then Roman officials. Then, Roman maps with Petra marked more boldly than before. Still, no armies arrived. The Nabataeans offered hospitality, as they always had. Water for the thirsty, shade for the weary, spices for the curious. They watched Roman habits carefully. They noticed how the officials walked with pride, how they took careful notes, how they asked many questions about trade routes, taxes. But they also saw that Rome, despite its armor and discipline, had needs, and Petra could meet them. In this way, a subtle balance began. Rome wanted control. The Nabataeans offered cooperation. The Nabataean kings understood diplomacy, not the diplomacy of treaties and threats, but of presence and patience. They sent gifts to Roman governors, boxes of incense, scrolls of poetry, rare stones wrapped in linen. Not bribes, but bridges. They invited Roman artists to visit Petra, and quietly commissioned local mosaics with Roman flourishes. They built bathhouses in the Roman style. They minted coins with a blend of Latin and Nabataean script. To an outsider, it might have looked like surrender. But to the Nabataeans it was preservation, not of land but of rhythm. They did not fight the tide. They flowed with it like the sand. Over time Petra began to change, gently, like the slow erosion of sandstone. Arches were added, columns thickened, Latin words appeared above shop stalls. But the spirit remained. Children still played in the shade of tombs. Merchants still laughed over cups of date wine. Priests still lit lamps at twilight in small sacred shrines. Roman visitors were often confused. This wasn't like their cities, no parades, no gladiators. Only calm. A calm that did not resist Rome, but also never fully belonged to it. Aretas IV, often called the Great, ruled for over 4 decades. He was Nabataea's most enduring king, not for conquest but for calm. His reign was a time of roads, of carved facades, of peace, even as Rome drew closer. He never raised an army against the empire, but he didn't kneel either. Instead, he made Petra so valuable, so stable, so cooperative, that Rome left it alone. For a while. And as Aretas aged, Petra flourished. Temples rose. Streets widened. Songs were sung in both Nabataean Aramaic and Greek. Here was a kingdom, still its own, still at peace. After Aretas' death, however, the wind shifted. Rome grew bolder. Its interest in Arabia intensified, not with violence but with plans. New taxes, new demands, new maps with new borders. The Nabataean court whispered of letters from the emperor, requests phrased as suggestions, advisors sent as guests. Even then, there were no battles, no sieges, only encroachment. Bit by bit, Petra's independence softened. But still, the people did not resist. They did not run. They did not fight. Instead, they continued. Baking, trading, carving stone, and the year 106 CE, the Roman Empire officially annexed Nabatea. The event was recorded, quietly. No major war, no recorded rebellion, Only an administrative shift. Petra was absorbed into the Roman province of Arabia Petraea. The Nabataean Kingdom ceased to be. And yet Petra remained. Its walls stood. Its people adapted. Its language lingered for a generation or two. The water still flowed through its channels. The spice still scented its air. The wind still sang between the canyons. And somewhere, perhaps, in the shade of a carved temple, a Nabataean scribe laid down his stylus, and listened to the silence of a kingdom that had chosen peace until its very last breath. After Nabataea quietly dissolved into the folds of the Roman Empire in 106 CE, Petra did not crumble. It settled. There were no fires, no falling statues, no banners torn from temple walls. The transition, as with so much in Nabataean history, was quiet. Roman officials came and took seats in the old stone offices. Taxes were now paid to Rome instead of Nabataea's kings. The coins changed again. Roman emperors now smiled or frowned on every silver piece. But the people. They rose in the morning to the same desert breeze. They drew water from the same channels carved centuries ago. They walked the same colonnaded streets lined with shops and stone benches. Life adjusted. But it continued. Peacefully. Petra's greatest inheritance was not its gold nor its incense. It was its water. And even after Roman annexation, the aqueducts flowed. Engineers from faraway lands marveled at the channels and cisterns. Some said the Nabataeans had mastered water in a land of drought better than any empire before them. And so Petra remained useful. It quenched the thirst of traders. It fed gardens and shaded groves. It supported animals, merchants, pilgrims, and poets. Some of the old water priests stayed on, quietly measuring rainfall in stone bowls, maintaining the hidden logic of Petra's water mind, a system so advanced yet so peaceful it required only care, not invention. Though the kings were gone, the scribes continued their work. They copied Roman decrees onto parchment. They translated old Nabataean prayers into Greek for curious visitors. They taught young ones to write in both scripts, letters flowing left to right, then right to left. By candlelight, they penned records of land, births, and marriages. They documented festivals, trade shipments, and names of those who donated to temple repairs. Their voices never shouted in revolution. Instead, they whispered in ink. And through that ink, Nabataea lived on. Quietly, Petra's temples, once sanctuaries to Dushara al-Uzza and other gods, stood tall even as Rome brought its pantheon. Some temples were rededicated. New altars were placed beneath ancient arches. But the locals didn't mind. They still brought offerings, still lit incense, still walked barefoot upon the cool stone. For them, the divine had always been patient and ever-present. The gods of Petra did not demand dominance. They preferred continuity. Even as names changed, the quiet flicker of belief endured. Imagine walking through Petra on a warm afternoon, 2 generations after its annexation. The streets are still clean, swept by local children and shaded by cloth canopies. Women carry baskets of dried fruits and honeyed breads. A man from Syria sells small glass beads near the base of the monastery steps. Near the market, an elderly woman grinds spices with a pestle, humming softly. Roman soldiers stroll past, their helmets tucked beneath their arms, off-duty, respectful. At a stall, a young boy is learning to count using pebbles and carved tablets. His teacher wears robes of both Roman and Nabataean patterning. The scene is not tense. It is not mournful. It is gentle. This is Petra under Rome, still breathing, still living, still itself. The Nabataeans had always lived with the earth, not against it. Their homes were cut into the cliffs, tucked into the folds of Petra's stone body. After the Romans came, many of these homes remained unchanged. In the cool shadows, families cooked flatbreads over coals. They used clay pots passed down from great-grandparents. On hot days, they lay on woven mats, telling stories of caravan days. Their interiors were simple. Shelves carved directly into the walls, niches for oil lamps, and low stone beds with linen cushions. These homes didn't need renovation. They were already perfect. Cool in the heat, dry in the rain, and quiet as a whisper. As the sun dipped below Petra's rugged horizon, its people gathered. Even centuries after its royal age ended, Petra still sang. Old men with reed flutes played songs no one remembered writing. Women hummed while weaving by lantern light. Children listened to tales of ancient caravans under the stars. Some stories were new, of Roman games and festivals. Others were timeless, of desert spirits, of gods who slept in stones. The people didn't speak of loss. They spoke of rhythm. Petra had changed. But its evenings remained as they had always been. Cool, calm, and full of voices that refused to fade. Petra didn't fall in a thunderous collapse. It slowly receded, like the echo of a song fading into canyon walls. The great city, so alive with merchants, music, and marbled steps, began to quiet. Trade routes shifted. Caravans chose newer paths. Seaports in the Red Sea and Mediterranean grew stronger. The incense road, once Petra's lifeblood, dried to a trickle. But the city didn't panic. It simply adapted, as it always had. Fewer travelers came. Shops closed earlier. Temples were quieter. But water still flowed, and the people still lingered. For a time earthquakes came, gentle, then stronger. Around the year 363 CE, a violent tremor shook Petra's foundations. Walls shifted. Columns tumbled. Parts of the water system fractured. The damage was not total, but it was enough. The city that had always lived on careful maintenance, water paths, walls, began to fray. Some families moved away. Others stayed, living among ruins softened by wind. Petra was not empty. But it was quieter. In a small room carved into stone, a scribe kept writing. His ink faded more quickly now. The scrolls he copied were for fewer people, mostly monks and Roman tacksmen. His daughter helped him mix ink from ash and crushed berries. Together, they read aloud from old Nabataean verses, then translated them into Greek. By then the old language was mostly gone, but in those cave chambers its echoes lived. Even as Petra dimmed, words stayed, carved into walls, scratched into pottery, sung to children. By the 6th century, only a handful of families lived in Petra's heart. They raised goats, collected herbs, and cooked over clay stoves. Children played among statues, unaware of their ancient grandeur. They carved their names next to kings, unbothered by history. Christianity found Petra then. A bishopric was established. Old temples were softened into churches. Worship changed form, but the rhythm remained. Stillness. Candles. Sandals brushing stone. Songs echoing softly off sandstone. The desert had taken Petra into its arms. By the early Islamic period, Petra had faded from maps. It became a whisper, a name passed between Bedouin tribes. No armies came. No invaders burned its walls. Time did the work instead. Sand drifted higher. Stone softened with wind. Goats trod paths once used by queens. Yet Petra never disappeared. She simply closed her eyes. Waiting. For centuries, Petra slept. Not in ruin, but in rest. Travelers passed nearby, unaware of the city hiding behind cliffs. Only local tribes remembered. They called it Al-Baida, or the Lost City. But to the rocks, the silence was not loss. It was meditation. The treasury stood untouched, its face darkened by time but unscarred. Temples curled inward. Homes whispered old names into the wind. Nothing cried out. Nothing crumbled in protest. Petra had always been quiet. Now she was simply still. Then came the footsteps of Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, a Swiss explorer in disguise, walking with locals in 1812. He asked questions, spoke soft Arabic, listened to tribal elders. And then he saw it. The carved stone, the canyon mouth, the glint of ancient gods and gods forgotten. Petra opened one eye. Just one, and now, dear listener, we walk once more through Petra, not as merchants or rulers or scribes, but as dreamers. The moonlight kisses ancient stone. The silence is thick, not with sorrow, but with the weight of lives once lived in harmony. From the soft wind on the treasury, to the lingering shadows in the colonnaded street, Petra endures. Not in battle, not in legend, but in stillness. And as you rest now, may you hear the soft sandals on stone, the hush of veils brushing walls, the ink drying on parchment in a distant cave. The Nabataeans are long gone, but their calm way of life, their whispered wisdom, still floats like desert dust, waiting for you in sleep. Good night, dear traveler. And sleep well among the stones.